And hopefully this is an informative webinar for everybody here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Patrick. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so everyone can see. Share my full screen. So, all right. So a few of the things we're gonna be going over here today is just getting some more, more at a milestone. Hopefully, you can get at the end of this, you'll be able to, take something from this and be able to, apply it to your system. So, and you have to mind, sorry, my connection here. You may see a couple cameras drop in and out, and things like that. I am on wireless as well as, over a VPN as well. So, hopefully the quality's good. You can hear my audio well. So hopefully that's good. If not, Patrick, please stop me and we can hopefully try and adjust and fix from there.
You look good right now, Bryson. So thank you.
Perfect. So the first thing I kind of wanted to go over today was hardware acceleration inside the Milestone Smart Client. And this is available in all versions of Milestone, whether you're on Essentials all the way up to Corporate. This is something that is applicable to you. So what we have here is this is running off of my laptop right here, which has an NVIDIA GPU on it. It's an NVIDIA 1070 card inside of here. And so we can actually take advantage of that NVIDIA card to decode our video to essentially lower the processing on our machine here. It's really easy to configure. Essentially, right into here in my smart client, under the advanced section, I have the option here for hardware acceleration. As you notice here, my option is set to auto, and off is the only other configuration there. So auto right there will auto determine if your video card is supported, and Milestone supports NVIDIA GPUs as well as the Intel graphics integrated into a Intel CPU as well. So you can see here, I've turned on video diagnostics, and if you want to make sure that your GPU is being used, if you go to advanced, and you go to the video diagnostics overlay right here, level 2 will show you the hardware acceleration right there. And you don't have to keep it on permanently. You can just turn it on, check to see if you're taking advantage of your GPU or not. But you can see here under hardware acceleration, I have some that are using my NVIDIA, some that are using Intel. And so it's taking advantage of both of those technologies on my machine because I am running an Intel CPU as well as an NVIDIA graphics card. So on my machine here, I'll go ahead and open up my task manager so you can kind of see my performance on my machine right now. So you can see here on my CPU usage, I'm looking at about 30%, and this is all while streaming live video right here. And down here on my GPU, my Intel is 19, my NVIDIA is about 7 to 20%, kind of jumping up and around there. So you can see the utilization right there happening. Now, if I were to go into my client and actually disable the hardware acceleration, we should see a dramatic change here, and you're going to see all these change to off. You should see a dramatic increase in my CPU usage, and my GPU usage should drop as well. So maybe I'm not seeing it very well on my machine. But in order to configure it as well for your GPU too, a couple of things inside your, if you have an NVIDIA card, one thing that you'll want to ensure as well that you have configured on your client is inside the NVIDIA control panel is some GPUs, especially Surface Books and those machines that have a GPU that can be essentially removed from the machine, or if you have one that's external from your computer, under the 3D settings of your GPU card, you can come into here to program settings and essentially define the client here and ensure that you're using your NVIDIA processor here, or you can define if you want to use your integrated as well. So you can see my auto select here is my integrated card. I can make sure that I'm using the NVIDIA processor so that it ensures that the GPU is using that. So that is one thing you can do there on your machine. So that's hardware acceleration in a nutshell. I don't know, Patrick, if you've seen any questions or anything like that come up from that or not, but it's really easy to configure and really easy to set up, and everyone can take advantage of it, and I highly recommend that you do. By default, the client is set to auto, so as long as your graphics card is updated, and that's including your NVIDIA and your Intel one, you should be able to take advantage of it right out of the box.
Yeah, Bryce, been no questions that have come over, but if anybody has one, feel free to unmute yourself and ask regarding hardware acceleration.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on from hardware acceleration, which is super straightforward, is the next one here is going to be adaptive streaming. And this is another way to essentially lower the overall performance of your computer, or the drain on your computer's usage as well. So keeping hardware acceleration on right here, I have this other option here for adaptive streaming. And you'll notice here that it's set to enabled on my machine right here. And what adaptive streaming does, it does require some configuration inside of the management client. And adaptive streaming is only available in expert and corporate versions of Milestone. So just keep that in mind as I talk about this. But adaptive streaming allows me to essentially define inside the client here to change overall stream settings based on the view size that I'm looking at here. So you notice here on this PTZ right now, if you look at this video diagnostics right here, that its resolution is 640 by 360. It's actually recording a 1080p stream, but because I'm viewing this live and it's in a much smaller window, I'm able to actually stream it at a 640 by 360 stream there, which is going to lower the overall draw on my computer's resources. So some of these other ones here that are not configured, you'll see that they're just 1080p streamed, even though the view size is much smaller. What's nice too, if I were to jump over to playback right now, you're going to see here on any of these cameras that have playback on them. So jump over to this one right here. You're going to see that the video will actually be 1080p. So you can see here on my resolution, that is the exact thing that we just saw happen and occur, but it's the 1080p stream right here. So that I'm not losing any quality by essentially using adaptive streaming. I'm only essentially lowering the overall bandwidth draw from the system, as well as lowering the resources used on my computer. So, and it's really good for live as well. And I'll go over the configuration on the back end for that. It does take a bit of work, and I'll kind of go over that. As you can see here, not all of my cameras are configured for adaptive streaming. So as I switch back over here to live, one thing that's nice too is this camera, for example, is actually 1080p. If I were to full screen this camera view here, you're going to notice the resolution is going to change to 1080p. So as I full screen it, it auto adjusts the resolution based on the view size of what I'm looking at on the camera. So it's adaptive, right? It's adapting to my environment, to my view sizes, which is really nice and really takes advantage of what these cameras are capable of doing. Almost all cameras on the market have the options of essentially streaming different stream settings on here. Again, I apologize, my network's probably not the greatest, so you're seeing a couple camera drops here and there. But to go over the configuration of adaptive streaming. So again, we want to ensure that we have it enabled inside of our client. And then we want to ensure that we have it set up on our cameras as well. And there's a bit of a configuration set up on these. So inside of here, inside the management client, on our cameras here, so we can have them our groups. So we use boring here to create device groups. We can come in here to our different devices on here and select these devices and be able to change the settings in bulk. So as we have our different models here, we can come into here and make these setting changes. You can also do this individually on cameras as well by clicking on them too. But again, it takes a bit of configuration to get this set up. But what you'll want to do is come into each of your cameras, go to the video stream settings here, and define what you want to record at. So in this camera in particular here, we're recording 1280 by 960. And then on our secondary stream here, we'd want to configure a lower resolution than our top stream. And you want to ensure that like you know the resolution settings as I wish there was a better way to do this, but sometimes I have to pull out a calculator. Is basically look at those resolutions and see is this 4:3 or 16:9, and then as I'm changing my stream settings, I go in and I configure those setups there, and I make sure that the different streams match what I'm recording at. That way you don't get a skewed version. Whereas if this view itself here is 4:3, if I were to set a 16:9 view, when it goes to that view there, you're going to see it cut off the top and the bottom of this view, and vice versa as well. If you were doing a 16:9 view here, so let's pick better, 16 by 9. So this one right here, 16 by 9 view here in corridor mode. If I were to select a 4:3 resolution, which is 640 by 480, right? If I were to select that as my resolution there, when it actually changes to that stream setting there, it would actually cut off the top and the bottom of the view. So you want to make sure that you're setting these at 16 at the right aspect ratio. So 640 by 360 would be the correct resolution for that aspect ratio. And again, it will take some time to set up. The larger your system is, the harder this is to do. But there are tools out there that can help with this, such as the boring toolbox. But if you have a smaller system or you have a lot of the same models, I would highly advise creating device groupings that are model specific, so that you can essentially go through these folders and make these setting changes in bulk. So once we've done this and we've configured a camera, so like I'll go to some of our exterior cameras here, which I know I've done already. It's like this north parking camera here. I have my video stream 1 at 30 frames per second with a 1920 by 1080 stream, 720p stream, and then a 640 by 360 stream. And these are at a lower frame rate as well. So with those adaptive stream settings, it takes everything into account here. So if you did a different codec or a different frame rate, that's what's going to stream to the client. So you can be recording 30 frames per second, but actually only needing to stream 8 frames per second essentially to the clients, so lowering that bandwidth usage. So once we've configured that, we'll then want to go to the stream settings here and ensure that we have our streams turned on for that we want to use. So I have streams 1, 2, and 3 enabled, and I have our live mode set to when needed. So then the client will decide when those streams are appropriate for usage depending on my view size. And you'll notice here on my top stream, I have it set as my default and my record stream. So that's the stream that I default want, but I want to make sure that I record that one as well. So that's the highest resolution stream that I have there. And these other 2 streams are only available when needed by the client. So that's kind of the configuration of adaptive streaming. It does take a bit of work on the back end side. So as a Milestone administrator, take the time in order to get this set up. But it's highly recommended if you're on expert or corporate to be taking advantage of this. Now, it was only introduced in 2019 R3. We're on a lower version of Milestone. I would highly look at seeing about the options of being able to upgrade. These are the features that Care Plus offers, is being able to upgrade to these newer features to add these capabilities to your system. So just keep that in mind there. So one of the other things that I want to go into that's actually going to play hand in hand with these 2 items that I've talked about here is smart client profiles. So actually, before I jump into that, I apologize. Patrick, are there any questions on that at all?
No questions have come in, but that's a good kind of pausing point. Does anybody have any questions on adaptive streaming? And another good point you made, Bryson, with staying current on Care Plus and why that's so important, and staying up to date on your current version of Milestone.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something to consider. I know a lot of customers, they look at only upgrading every so often because of feature issues that they may run into or something like that. But really, with Care Plus, I mean, if you have it, you should be upgrading your system. I mean, it just makes sense. You can take advantage of these features. Obviously, every environment's different, so I don't want to tell someone, make sure you upgrade every single version or anything like that. You may have your requirements in your environment to only do an upgrade once a year. However, I really feel like these upgrades do add a lot of different things, as well as bug fixes for you too. Milestone's been really good about pushing out hot fixes and bug fixes on these versions. So it's been very actually impressive at how well they've handled the issues that have come up and addressing those on newer versions and new releases.
Awesome. Yeah, no questions have come in, so keep at it. Thank you.
Perfect. So the next thing I'm going to go over is something else that I'm not sure how many people use it or what your experience is with it, but I would say the majority of customers that I've worked with probably never do anything with smart client profiles. We do have some that we have, obviously worked heavily with that do set up smart client profiles for every single role in their system, which is awesome. And that's a really good way to take advantage of it. So a couple things to know about Smart Client Profiles. It is available in almost every version of Milestone. However, the amount of ones that you can do, it varies essentially on the version of Milestone that you have. So for Expert and Corporate, for example, Corporate allows you to have an unlimited amount of Smart Client Profiles. Expert will only allow you to have 3 different profiles. And then the lower tier versions, I believe you're only allowed 1 profile per version. And I don't think you can do it in Essentials, which is the free version of Milestone. I don't think you have an option really to change anything in profiles. Nick or you guys from Milestone, feel free to jump in and correct me on that. I'm not 100% sure.
Carl, I believe that is correct with the 3 for advanced and none for essential. Can you confirm that for me?
I believe that to be the case. I'd have to look up Matrix real quick.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I just wanted to confirm that as well. But yeah, so if you're on any of the higher tier like Pro Plus, Expert, or Corporate, this is something that is going to pertain to you and something you're going to want to know how to use. So jumping into the profiles real quick. So right here on our first page of our profiles, we have the option here to see what roles are currently using this profile. And this helps when you're especially creating lots of different profiles for different types of users. And what a profile essentially allows you to do in a general overview, and again, I'll kind of go through it in greater detail as I continue through this, but a general overview, it allows you to kind of customize the smart client for individual users or overall for your entire system. So you can kind of cater to your users. So if you have features that you want to ensure that are enabled on your system, or you want to ensure things that are hidden essentially in the smart client from users, or to just change the overall look and appearance of the smart client, this is where you do it. And this really saves time, because you don't need to go to each individual smart client and make these configuration changes. You don't need to go into the settings on all the clients to ensure that hardware acceleration is enabled, to ensure that adaptive streaming is turned on. As you noticed in my smart client before, in those settings options, I had an option here that said follow server. So as you see here, follow server. So you can lock down these settings and ensure that the system is following the server. And these are what's defined essentially in the client, or in the smart client profile. So these settings here can be set up to follow the server, and that's what the server has configured. So going through it step by step here. So inside of our general section here, we have all of our options inside of our client here that you can essentially customize and push out to our individual users. So, and on our default smart client profile, which is what everyone's set up to use right here, you can come into here and change the, for example, the logo of the of a blank tile. So inside of here, you can see here it's set to show the Milestone logo. But if we wanted to, we could go ahead and we could import and upload a different logo into there. For example, our company logo or something like that. It's just something that really makes the smart client stand out. You know, when you have a couple blank spaces or something like that on your smart client, to throw in the company logo right there, and that's something you can import right into here and push out through your smart client profiles. We do have some customers that they are broadcasting the smart client screen right up onto a monitor or something like that for the public to see, and it's a government building, and they are not allowed to essentially advertise the products and the things that they're using. So having the Milestone logo there is like a no, can't have it, right? Just because it's a government requirement that we cannot be advertising those products like that out openly. It's a silly regulation, but it's come up a few times. But this is a place where you can essentially put in your own custom logo or completely clear out the logo as well. You can go ahead and put nothing here, or you can put a black image here as well too. So if you wanted to completely block it out there too. So, but you can see into here, these are pretty much every setting that you have inside of your smart client right here. You can come in here and you can customize right here your default buffer ratio, your frame rate settings, the image quality settings, and things like that. And you can see over here, you can actually lock down these settings so that these can't be changed by the end user. So if you go ahead and check these boxes here inside the smart client, it'll become a grayed out setting that they cannot change. So some end user can't go in and say, actually, I want to set my default image quality to low and make this recording server completely bogged down to re-encode all those videos to stream it at a low setting for that one single user. Going over here into the advanced section, here's where you can enable those two things that I've mentioned earlier. So you have our hardware acceleration right here. You can ensure that it's set to auto, and then you can go ahead and you can lock it down and say, yes, I want to make sure every client has that configured. This can hurt you, so keep that in mind. If the machine is not properly updated and the GPU graphics drivers are outdated, it can cause a client crash because it's not appropriately using those GPU settings, and so it crashes the client. So if you do this and now suddenly everyone's client's crashing, like, I think we might have an issue here with our Intel graphics drivers or my NVIDIA drivers as well. And then same here with adaptive streaming right here. We can go ahead and we can make sure that it's enabled, and we can lock that setting here as well too. So that really ties into, you know, the two things that I've talked in right here, and ensuring that those are set up on your system. And again, if you're on expert or corporate, you can come into here and ensure that you have multiple smart client profiles set up into here, so you can have different types of users that have different settings options or different things available to them. And it really does help you kind of manage your system a lot better by using these profiles. Before, when I was a manager over an expert system, I had created three basic profiles because I was on expert. So I had a full system rights one, I had a limited one, and then an extremely limited one that essentially locked down the client where the only thing they had access to was the live tab, right? So you can really get granular into that as well. So you can come into here and you can say, you know, the playback tab, we can actually make sure we don't want that. We want that to be completely unavailable to them. So they don't even have the option to go into playback on that tab there. You can you could turn off the live tab as well if you had a user that was just a playback user. But I haven't seen that really happen before, but it's definitely something you could do. So you could basically make their smart client custom to what their use case is. You may have a user that doesn't need to see live video ever, but they are only going through playback. So why do they need that live tab at all? Let's just give them the playback tab, so it makes their client a little bit simpler, so they don't have to navigate as far or as hard. It automatically opens up, and there's the playback tab right there for them. The other things too you have is you can actually change the export settings here too. This is something that a lot of our customers are using these smart client profiles for, is they're able to change the export path location to essentially a network path. So they can lock this down, and they can say anytime you export any video from Milestone, it goes to a network location that is available to everyone. It really helps with that, especially if you're a large organization that has lots of locations, where you can essentially export all your video to a network location. You no longer need to load it onto a thumb drive, drive that thumb drive over to somewhere, create a NAS, get a network location where you can put this video, and then export that video to that location and say, hey, it's in there. This is the folder name of it. And then that HR representative or the security officer can go and review that video right there from the NAS without having to go to that location or exchange some physical media. So I mean, these are the settings you can set up. You can make sure that you're only exporting in the ExpertTech format, so the media player format is unavailable, or you can make sure that it's only MKV as well, and you lock that down, so that's the only format that they're exporting to. I mean, these, like I said, you can really dive down in deep into here. You can ensure that everything that's exported in the ExpertTech format requires a password, and you can actually set that password here, so everything has the same password. So I mean, it really does help you control your system a lot more than what you're probably doing today and what you may have your end users doing that are using your system. I really do feel like this is something that everyone should know about and everyone should be using. The last thing that I want to go over here, again, there's lots more in here. If you're not using alarms, you can turn off the alarm manager tab so that doesn't even show up. You can turn on the desktop notifications as well. You can set that so that's on or off. But the last thing here is under the advanced here is the ability to turn on multicasting as well. So I have Milestone on the line here as well to kind of talk over multicasting, which we'll do next. But I'll ask if there's any questions or anything. But I really want to kind of discuss the benefits of using multicast, some of the disadvantages that you may run into, and things like that. And I'll kind of show my screen and hopefully help that message come across. But Patrick, are there any questions on what I've talked about?
Nothing's come through on the chat, but does anybody have any questions on smart client profile?
Hey,
Again,
Patrick and Bryson, this is Nick with Milestone. We were able to confirm currently on Professional Plus for smart client profiles, you have the ability to create up to 3. Moving into our advanced product line for expert, the limit is 12, and for corporate, there is no limit. And now this is on current 2020 R2. I believe that there were maybe some caps down on some of the older versions of the software, but on the newest version, corporate does not have a limit on the number of smart profiles.
Awesome. That's great news. That's really cool about the expert. I did not know that, especially Professional Plus too, with the 3 options there too. So that's really awesome.
Awesome. Well, Bryson, thanks for all of the very informative presentation so far. This is Nick with Milestone. I'm also on the line with my partner Carl. We're here today. Bryson and Patrick asked us to briefly touch on multicasting, some of the benefits. It's really something that Bryson and I discussed before the call. It's really an underutilized feature in Milestone that we actually don't see many people taking advantage of. And I think there probably should be some more people using it. If you're hearing about multicasting for the first time, maybe you have kind of a general understanding of what it is, but at the very base level, essentially it's just sending data across a computer network to several users at the same time. That's kind of the base definition of multicasting. And now the use case for Milestone specifically, or for video management, generally would be multicasting out of a recording server, multiple smart clients. So, for example, if we had 10 smart clients all running at the same time on the recording server, when that recording server sends out video from a camera, it sends out one stream of video that goes to a special multicasting address that more viewers are able to listen to simultaneously all at the same time. That way on the network, there's really only one stream coming out of the server that's hitting multiple clients. The advantage in doing so is that it can be a really big saver in network bandwidth. That's where the real big advantage of multicasting. Now, when it comes to the reason why I think that a lot of people haven't set this up or haven't looked too far into this is it can be a little bit complex to set up. And I'm on the line with my partner, Carl, who I'm hoping can dig in a little bit more on this. But the setup, in terms of Milestone, it's simply, toggling, flipping off and on, as Bryson was showing in the bottom of the smart client profile. You saw multicasting, enabled, disabled. So it's not difficult on the Milestone side. It's more on the network side of things where it can get a little more complex.
Yeah, and
Carl,
sure. To expand on that a little bit, for your network side, it becomes more difficult when you're trying to route it between different networks or subnets is really where a lot of your complexity comes in. Multicast is not as common in the enterprise as it once was, now that we have bigger bandwidth pipes everywhere, but it definitely can be a bandwidth saver, especially if you're looking at trying to live view large high resolution cameras. So if you're trying to view one of the cool Access Q3709s, I mean, that's a large camera with a huge stream coming off of it. If we can just multicast that out to one address and we have 5 clients picking it up, it'll save resources everywhere. Everything from the recording server for producing the video to the network bandwidth to the network switches and the backbone itself for absorbing that traffic. And really, there inside of Milestone, there's only 2 places you need to set it up. As we showed, just setting up your multicast in here, and this will be determining where your IP addresses and the ports are going out to. And then on each camera, you would go through and manually specify that this is allowed for live viewing or that. So if you go to, the client tab right there, that's the other checkbox. So really, that's the entire setup inside of Milestone. It's more making sure that your network side is ready.
Yeah, and you can do this in bulk as well too. So as I mentioned before with these device groupings, you can enable the live multicast here. You can see I have a group selected here and I can enable this in bulk on all these cameras here once I have my network configured for multicast. It's definitely something that I think a lot of customers could benefit from. And it is a question that we have heard from some of our customers as well is, hey, how do we take advantage of multicasting? Who do we need to talk to, right? On the Milestone side, really, it's very straightforward to get multicasting enabled. Really where it comes down to is making sure that you can partner with your IT teams and get them to help you ensure that your network is set up for it. Get those multicasting groups configured so that when you are streaming, if you have sets of cameras and sets of groups and things like that set up, you can ensure those multicasting groups are configured correctly so that if you have groups that are viewing the same cameras all the time, that they're pushing out. And that's one thing that on the network side that you want to ensure that it is configured correctly, or else essentially if multicasting is misconfigured, you'll essentially be broadcasting instead of multicasting, and that's not ideal on the network. You'd essentially just be sending it out to everybody. Not ideal in a bandwidth a limited bandwidth scenario. Patrick, are there any questions from anyone on that? That's pretty much all we have today for you guys. That was really it. So if there's any questions on anything that we touched over, it'd be,
Yeah,
even if it wasn't something that we went on to, please reach out.
I was going to say, Bryson, yeah, we've got Milestone experts on the line. So for all of our clients that are on, use this time to, dig in and ask any questions about your Milestone system. So.
Absolutely.
Well, it looks like no one has any questions.
Hey Patrick, this is Jeff Staley at City Creek Center. Just a real quick question.
Sure.
More of a request, perhaps on a future Milestone webinar, if we could go over a little bit more about some of the integration with access control. I know that that's a large topic in and of itself with Milestone, so I don't expect us to have time to overview everything right now, but that's just a request for perhaps a future webinar.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. And I'll send you, after this, I'll send you a link that I think may help you. One of our earlier webinars, we kind of talk about the unified system and, really how to marry your access control and video surveillance together. So, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so just to touch base on access control for you, since we have some time here.
Bryson,
it's really straightforward.
Bryson, really quick, yeah. We do have a question. What is the spec required to run Milestone Smart Viewer or Smart Client, I guess?
The Smart Client.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on how many cameras you're viewing. Realistically is what it comes down to. I would recommend, a higher CPU and a GPU as well, if possible. If you can put a GPU in that machine, especially an NVIDIA card, one of the newer ones, you're gonna, I'm not saying a 3080 or anything like that, but a P1000 or P1000 would be fine. A 1070 is a great card. Realistically, Milestone only utilizes the processor on the graphics card. It's not actually taking advantage of all that on those cards as well. So if you buy a GPU that's got 32 gigs of RAM on it, it's great for gaming, but realistically, all Milestone's going to be taking advantage of is that processor on those cards. So in terms of specs, again, it really comes down to how many cameras you plan on viewing, the resolution you plan on viewing, and the codec that you're viewing the cameras at as well are all critical in defining the specs here for you. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say at least an i5 with at least 8 gigs of RAM and an NVIDIA card if possible. If not, ensure that it has an Intel QuickSync enabled GPU on it, or in CPU, sorry, so that you can take advantage of at least the Intel GPU encoding. Milestone, I don't know if you want to jump in there and have any recommendations as well for Smart Client building a computer for it, but
honestly, you nailed it. Yeah.
Speaking of gaming, I saw Steam there on your desktop. Are you a big gamer?
Yes, I am. I definitely dabble.
Carl, you got anything you want to throw on?
Sure. Yeah, no, that is spot on, 100%. Intel QuickSync and a GPU will help immensely. Like you mentioned, it's not so much using all of the big CUDA cores and the RAM and everything else on the card, your shaders. It's really just looking at the H.264 decoder. And so as a fun fact, you actually can put a NVIDIA card in a recording server as well if you're running expert or corporate, and we actually can use the NVIDIA card on the server side for video motion detection as well.
Yeah, and that's right here. You can see here, by default, it is set to automatic on all these devices. So that should be enabled for most people that are on the expert or corporate level, and at least on, I believe it was introduced in 19R3. But yeah.
And did that answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, I think so. If you can hear me, but yeah.
Yep.
So we're just going to put in one new machine, and it's done in our docks, and it has 2 monitors, and they're probably going to have about 8 cameras on each monitor. So we just need to know the specs of what we should ask to purchase for. So pretty much just the minimum requirements to get that machine. It's going to be a viewer only.
Yeah, so with 16 streams there, assuming they're all 1080p, I mean, I would definitely, if you can, prefer a desktop over a laptop. You're just going to get a little bit more power from that machine, especially your options on a GPU as well. So if you could go with a desktop model machine, obviously if you can afford it, i7 100% all the way, and an NVIDIA card in there. Doesn't really matter the model. You don't need to go crazy, but as long as you have an NVIDIA card, one of the newer models, I would say, like, it needs to have a processor it's called Pascal is one of the models that they support, and I can make available to everyone inside of this group here a list from Milestone actually that tells you the essentially recommended cards from NVIDIA that have been tested and supported. But if you're buying a card like a 2080 or a 2070 or something like that, one of the newer ones, 1660 or something like that, you're going to be fine. Really, it's going to be harder to find one that isn't supported than it is to find one that than is.
Okay, so if we tell our vendor just we need an NVIDIA card, they're going to know. I mean, pretty much anyone they have access to should be sufficient for what we need.
Yeah, pretty sure. As long as it's an NVIDIA card, for sure. I know a lot of times they like to throw an AMD card in there, and unfortunately, Milestone cannot take advantage of AMD GPUs yet.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
And speaking of Milestone too, I know the new release comes out. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's like the 28th of this month. Is that right?
Oh, it is later this month. I don't have the exact date offhand.
All good. All good.
Patrick. End of this month.
End of this month. Sounds good. Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions while we've got the expert Milestone people on the line? Okay. Well, we just want to, thank everybody for joining today. I'll send a recording out of this afterwards. If there's anybody in your organization that you feel would benefit from it, you can forward it on. All these are always available too on our YouTube channel. Friday, we have a webinar. It's called Screening Safely. So if any of you have organizations where you have a lot of people coming through, certain entrances, there's a pretty cool new technology that this has been implemented. So check that out. And we're also doing these next week with some access control and visitor management solutions. So hopefully you guys have learned something. And yeah, we appreciate you joining us. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you.